Imagine a king so obsessed with purity, so fixated on the idea of marrying only virgins, that he would change the course of an entire nation just to satisfy his desires. A man whose passion for control, perfection, and purity would lead to betrayal, heartbreak, and even death. This man was Henry VIII, the infamous Tudor king of England. Known for his towering presence, iron will, and an ego as large as his empire, Henry was not just a ruler, he was a man haunted by an obsession that would shape the destiny of his country. His relentless pursuit of virgin brides was more than personal preference. It was an all-consuming mania that left a bloody trail in its wake. Henry VIII was born in 1491, the second son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. From a young age, he was groomed for greatness, steeped in the culture of courtly love, chivalry, and royal expectations. But it was his father's iron grip and the constant whispers of court intrigue that forged a young Henry who would equate control with love and purity with loyalty. By his teenage years, he was a brilliant scholar, a masterful athlete, and a charismatic figure whose charm could sway the nobility. Yet, behind the dazzling exterior, there lurked a darker fascination, an almost fanatical belief that only untouched women of unquestionable virtue, were worthy of his love and his throne. Henry's first marriage was to Catherine of Aragon, the widow of his elder brother Arthur. Though politically advantageous, the marriage soon became fraught with tension. Catherine was older than Henry, and their union produced only one surviving child, Mary. For Henry, this was unacceptable. The king's obsession with bloodlines and virginity became intertwined with his desperation for a male heir. Catherine's inability to give him a son, despite her loyalty and love, only fueled Henry's conviction that divine intervention had cursed him and that a new, virginal bride might bring the future he desired. Enter Anne Boleyn, a young and captivating court lady whose wit, charm, and audacity would both enthrall and frustrate the king. Anne was rumored to be less than virtuous, yet Henry became obsessed with her. He demanded not only her love but her complete submission, envisioning a perfect, pure union that could deliver the son he so desperately craved. Anne's flirtation with Henry's courtship ignited a political and religious storm, one that would eventually lead Henry to break from the Roman Catholic Church, creating the Church of England. All this because of his obsession with purity, virginity, and control. Henry's desire to marry a virgin younger than Catherine led to one of the most dramatic upheavals in English history. When Pope Clement VII refused to annul his marriage to Catherine, Henry took radical action. He declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England, severing ties with Rome, and setting a precedent that would alter England's religious landscape forever. His obsession was so strong that it reshaped centuries of tradition, leaving behind a legacy of schism, persecution, and a court rife with intrigue. After Anne Boleyn's execution, Henry turned his attention to Jane Seymour, a gentle and seemingly virtuous woman. Jane embodied the ideal: youthful, pure, and submissive. Henry's obsession with virginity and perfection intertwined with his relentless need for a male heir. Jane would finally deliver Edward, the son Henry had longed for, but her death shortly after childbirth left the king devastated and hungry for the next perfect bride, further illustrating how Henry's obsession with purity and lineage dominated his every decision. Henry's next attempt at a virginal union was Anne of Cleves, a German princess chosen for political alliances. But when he met her, Henry declared her unattractive, claiming she did not meet his standards of ideal beauty and purity. The marriage was annulled swiftly, yet it revealed the superficial and obsessive nature of Henry's desire for perfection. Beauty, virginity, and submissiveness were non-negotiable. Even political convenience could not override his personal obsession. Catherine Howard, young and naive, became Henry's fifth wife. At barely 17, she embodied everything Henry claimed to desire: youth and innocence. But her past indiscretions, real or rumored, became a death sentence. Henry's obsession with virginity reached a terrifying apex. Catherine's execution was a grim testament to the king's deadly combination of desire, obsession, and paranoia. In Henry's world, purity was not just preferred, it was demanded, and failure to meet his impossible standards could cost lives. Henry's sixth and final wife, Catherine Parr, was different. Older, intelligent, and experienced, she survived by understanding Henry's obsessions and by navigating the dangerous terrain of his volatile desires. Catherine's ability to survive highlighted the extremes of Henry's fixation. To live in his world, a woman had to embody his ideals of virginity, loyalty, and submission, or risk fatal consequences. Modern historians suggest that Henry's fixation on virginity and purity was more than political, it was psychological. Scholars argue that Henry's obsession may have stemmed from early experiences, fear of being cuckolded, or a deep-seated insecurity about his legacy. His marriages reveal a man driven by more than lust. He was consumed by a compulsive need to control not just his wives' bodies but the very lineage of his kingdom. Henry VIII's obsession with virginity wasn't just personal, it had profound political implications. His insistence on marrying only virgins shaped succession laws, prompted executions, and sparked wars. Entire families rose or fell based on their ability to satisfy the king's whims. England itself became a kingdom where obsession dictated the fate of nations, a chilling reminder of how a single man's fixation can alter history. The women of Henry VIII's court lived in constant fear. Every glance, every action, every whisper could be interpreted as disloyalty or impurity. This environment of terror was Henry's doing, a kingdom ruled not just by law but by the king's obsessive desires. His quest for virginal brides created a culture of anxiety, secrecy, and deadly competition, leaving scars that would echo for generations. Henry's obsession with virgins also reflected the cultural and religious attitudes of the time. The idealization of virginity was tied to notions of divine favor, family honor, and social standing. Henry's personal mania exaggerated these cultural norms to deadly extremes, making his court a crucible where the failure to meet impossible purity standards could be fatal. Despite his charisma and intellect, Henry was a man capable of extreme cruelty. And Boleyn and Catherine Howard were only two of the many casualties of his obsession. His willingness to execute, exile, or disinherit anyone who threatened his ideals of purity illustrates a terrifying blend of charm and brutality. History remembers the king for his audacity, but the cost of his obsession was immeasurable. Today, Henry VIII is remembered for his 6 marriages, his break with the Catholic Church, and his larger-than-life persona. Yet at the core of his story lies an obsession that drove his decisions, reshaped history, and destroyed lives. The king's fixation on virginity and purity is not a footnote. It is the central thread that binds his personal life to the fate of a nation. For Henry's wives, the king's obsession was a matter of survival. Their choices, freedom, and very lives were dictated by a man whose ideals of purity were as unrealistic as they were unforgiving. Understanding Henry's obsession helps us see the human cost of his reign, the fear, manipulation, and tragedy endured by the women who were, in his eyes, either perfect or disposable. Henry's desire for virgins was never just personal, it was political. Each marriage was a strategic move, a gamble for alliances, heirs, and legitimacy. Yet even political necessity could not override his obsession. This blending of personal desire and political calculation made Henry VIII one of history's most dangerously unpredictable monarchs. Henry's obsession was a lens through which we can view the psychology of tyranny. When personal desire dictates national policy, obsession becomes power, and power becomes tyranny. His relentless pursuit of virgins reveals a ruler who conflated love with control, devotion with submission, and morality with dominance. Henry's obsession also shaped his court. Advisors, nobles, and clerics were forced to navigate a landscape defined by the king's desires. Alliances were made and broken based on the king's whims, and those who failed to anticipate or satisfy his obsession often suffered dire consequences. The court itself became an extension of Henry's fixation, a place where politics and obsession were inseparable. Even as Henry aged, gained weight, and became physically incapacitated, his obsession did not wane. The king's fixation on virginity and purity remained central to his identity, demonstrating that his desire was not fleeting lust but a lifelong compulsion. His later years, marked by pain and paranoia, only intensified his need for control over women, heirs, and history itself. Anne Boleyn's execution was a turning point, not just for Henry, but for England itself. Her beheading sent shockwaves through the court and the kingdom, demonstrating the lethal consequences of failing the king's impossible standards. For Henry, it was both a punishment and a lesson in the dangers of imperfection. The young queen, who had captivated his heart, became a cautionary tale of what happens when desire and obsession collide. In the aftermath, Henry's fixation on virginal purity became more ruthless. He demanded absolute loyalty and perfection, not only from his wives but from the court, nobles, and even clergy. Henry's obsession transformed the Tudor court into a theater of constant tension. Courtiers navigated a world where whispers, gestures, or rumors could provoke royal wrath. Every lady-in-waiting, every noble, every potential bride was scrutinized through Henry's lens of purity. The court became a place of fear and intrigue, where ambition, beauty, and obedience were constantly measured against an impossible ideal. This environment allowed Henry to wield fear as a tool, controlling not only his wives but the entire social and political fabric of England. Jane Seymour, unlike Anne Boleyn or Catherine Howard, fulfilled Henry's obsessive ideals. She was young, demure, and above all, seemingly untainted. Henry's fixation on virginity was intertwined with his desperate desire for a male heir. Jane delivered Edward VI, the long-awaited son, but her death in childbirth was a devastating blow. Henry's obsession did not diminish. Instead, it became tinged with mourning, reflecting the fragility of life and perfection in his eyes. Jane's story revealed the cruel paradox of Henry's obsession. Those who satisfied him perfectly were celebrated briefly but often doomed by circumstance. Every marriage Henry pursued was a delicate blend of politics and personal desire. Anne of Cleves was chosen for alliance purposes, yet her appearance and inability to match Henry's ideal purity led to an immediate annulment. This decision showed that even political expediency could not override his obsession. Henry's personal standards, rather than reason or strategy, dictated the fate of nations. Alliances were formed and broken based on his whims, leaving diplomats and nobles in constant uncertainty, illustrating the dangerous intersection of obsession and power. Catherine Howard's story is one of tragic inevitability. Her youth and beauty represented everything Henry desired, but her past indiscretions, real or imagined, sealed her fate. Henry's obsession with purity turned fatal, demonstrating that even a hint of imperfection was intolerable. The execution of a young queen sent a chilling message to all women of the court. In Henry's world, purity was mandatory, and failure was deadly. The king's fixation had become a tool of terror, a lethal instrument of control that extended far beyond his personal life. Catherine Parr, Henry's final wife, survived because she understood the depths of his obsession. Older, experienced, and politically astute, she navigated the dangerous waters of Henry's court with intelligence and subtlety. She was neither a victim nor a pawn. She survived by adapting to the king's obsessive worldview. Her story highlights a critical aspect of Henry's reign. Survival required more than beauty. It required understanding, manipulation, and absolute obedience to the king's ideals. Historians suggest that Henry's fixation on virginity and purity reflected deeper insecurities. Despite his power and charisma, he feared betrayal, illegitimacy, and the failure of his dynasty. Obsession with virginal brides was, in part, an attempt to control the uncontrollable loyalty, love, and the future of his bloodline. His personal compulsions, magnified by absolute authority, had catastrophic consequences, turning private obsession into national policy and shaping England's history in ways that would last centuries. Henry's obsession was inseparable from his obsession with lineage. Every marriage, every annulment, and every execution was tied to the pursuit of a pure heir. His obsession dictated succession, determined the legitimacy of children, and influenced alliances across Europe. The king's fixation on virginity was not merely personal preference. It was a mechanism to secure his bloodline and, by extension, his legacy. This obsession created ripple effects that reached far beyond his lifetime, affecting generations of monarchs and the political landscape of England. The women who married Henry lived under constant scrutiny. Their bodies, choices, and reputations were controlled by a man whose obsession with perfection could not tolerate deviation. Fear, anxiety, and despair were constants in the Tudor court. For Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and even Jane Seymour, the pursuit of Henry's approval was a matter of life and death. Henry's obsession transformed love, marriage, and politics into instruments of control, illustrating the terrifying power of a monarch consumed by personal compulsion. Even after death, Henry VIII's obsession with virgins and purity left a lasting imprint on history. His reign redefined marriage, succession, and royal authority. The Church of England, the culture of the Tudor court, and the political maneuverings of his heirs all bore the marks of a king obsessed with control, perfection, and virginity. In understanding Henry's life, obsession emerges as a central force, illustrating the ways personal mania can shape history, devastate lives, and redefine an entire nation. For Henry, virginity was both a weapon and a curse. It could secure power, create heirs, and elevate women to queenship, but it could just as easily destroy them. The king's obsession turned natural human qualities into tools of terror. In Henry's court, the expectation of absolute purity became a lethal standard, demonstrating the terrifying consequences of combining desire, authority, and obsession in one man. Ironically, Henry's obsession with virginity and male heirs led to the birth of Elizabeth I, a daughter who would become one of England's greatest monarchs. The very obsession that caused Anne Boleyn's downfall inadvertently shaped the future of England, proving that even in obsession, history finds twists that the most powerful individuals cannot control. Elizabeth's reign, marked by intelligence and resilience, was a testament to the unexpected legacies of Henry's compulsions. Henry VIII's obsession with virgins has fascinated historians, writers, and filmmakers for centuries. From Shakespeare to modern TV dramas, the king's marriages and fixations have become mythologized, blending historical fact with legend. This fascination reflects not only the shock of his actions but also the universal intrigue with obsession, power, and human desire. Henry's story serves as a cautionary tale. Obsession, when unchecked by reason or morality, can redefine an entire world. The life of Henry VIII offers lessons about the dangers of obsession. Personal fixation, when amplified by power, can devastate lives, shape nations, and create legacies of fear and control. Henry's relentless pursuit of virgins, male heirs, and perfection transformed his reign into a study of human compulsions and their far-reaching consequences. His story challenges us to consider the cost of desire when untempered by empathy, humility, or reason. Henry's obsession can also be viewed through a psychological lens. The combination of early trauma, immense responsibility, and societal pressure created a man whose need for control and perfection dominated his life. Virginity, loyalty, and obedience were not merely preferences, they were mechanisms to manage anxiety, assert dominance, and secure his legacy. Understanding Henry's obsession helps us explore the intersection of power, desire, and human vulnerability in history.